Yeah, still looking good on Skype. I'm still here with you.
Yeah, and I still hear you, and the stream is still going. So anyway, we'll keep going. So I was just about to say we were unmarred by technical difficulties, and literally just had some kind of technical difficulty. But I think we're
Yeah.
back online.
That's Murphy for you right there.
Oh my goodness. So
Uh,
we'll keep going while we're ahead. Welcome everybody to CanHammer TV. This is November 20th episode, and I have special guest on tonight, Geoff from Canada. Welcome, Geoff.
Welcome, everybody. Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
So, Geoff, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about yourself in terms of what we're going to talk about, which is kind of Shadespire and Nightvault. How'd you get into it, and what interests you about it?
Yeah, I got into it during season one, Shadespire, back when everybody just referred to it as Shadespire. Nobody thought there would be a second season called Nightvault, and from then on, we'd call it Underworlds. But I've really enjoyed it so far. I really like the kind of the kill team aspect of it. I really loved chess growing up. I grew up with Magic, and this just kind of feels like a combination of chess, some cards, limited dice, because I think that frustrates me sometimes with 40K, because I play 40K primarily. Is just the amount of dice and the amount of accounting and all that stuff that you got to do can sometimes wear on what should be a more fun experience. But with Underworlds, you're kind of maxing out at 8 dice, and the cards are simple, but they're complex. The movement is straightforward. There's really no arguing or kind of cheating out inches here and there. So I just generally like the play experience. It doesn't feel as combative as some tournaments I go to, and everybody that I've played with just seems to be really, really into it. So it's nice when that type of passion bleeds out into the games.
Yeah, I think what really appeals is I know that maybe some people think it's just a gateway game to Sigmar or 40K, which it maybe is in some way, but it's very streamlined, very simple, yet has tactical complexity, and then you add the sort of deck building complexity to it. But I think the most surprising thing for me, maybe, is I don't know. Every 2 months, GW comes out with another board game or something, right? And even I can't even remember the name of that one that was supposed to be the next big thing. Kill Team was supposed to be a big thing, and then was that the one that was supposed to be Necromunda, and then so everyone thought maybe Nightfall was just going to be another kind of splash in the pool game for GW, but they keep going, and they seem serious about making it competitive. They produced what we're going to talk about tonight, which is banned and restricted list. Which, you got to be fairly serious about the game if you're going to go to such efforts to ban cards.
Yeah, and I think also the effort they put into just putting it on a platform above their other games as the competitive platform. They've got deck building programs online. They post winning deck lists. Like, I've never seen them post a 40K winning list or kind of trumpet it ever. So I think they really look at this as the competitive game that they don't really see AOS and 40K getting to. I think that's always been maybe a more narrative platform that people want to play competitive, and they've kind of over the last few years been more on board with that. But this seems to be something that they really want to see pushed through as the ultimate competitive game, where everybody comes to the table with the exact same amount of war bands. Because if you buy all the cards, at $35 an army, it's clearly that cheap. You can buy every single army in the game for cheaper, for half the price than you can a 40K army, a single 40K army. So I think they look at it and say everybody's coming with the same opportunities. Just because you didn't start Eldar, 5 years ago, doesn't mean that you can't all of a sudden have the deck or the warband that you want to play with. So I think that's really endearing, and I really would encourage anybody who's listening to this, or if you're already listening to this, you're probably already into it. But get other people into it too. It's a really great game. I play at home with my wife, my kids. It's a straightforward game, but
Wow,
the minute you want to take it more complex, you can. At the end of
nice.
the day, it's magic and chess mixed together.
I haven't taken the plunge of introducing my spouse to it, but I was going to introduce it to my brother who doesn't play 40K or Sigmar but likes board games, and I think that's an
Hmm.
easy transition to make, especially if you're into the fantasy sort of setting. Um,
Yeah, if you take the IP out of it, like, it's just very similar to any other game that you would pick up at a Walmart or a Toys R Us, or I guess maybe people in the States, is Toys R Us still around? I don't know. But either way, I think it's a straightforward game that has a few dice, a few pretty straightforward rule mechanics, and if you kind of forget that it's part of this bigger IP that might have a stigma to it, anybody can get in on it. So my wife doesn't know there's a big element to it, and I play it at lunch with other people kind of who around the area. It's really quick to get games in, so it's not like a 3-hour campaign that's really tough to talk new people into.
Yeah, I was like, what's Geoff up to, man? He's playing Nightvault at lunch.
Well, man, you know what's amazing? You can take it to a coffee shop. Like, people just walk by and think you're playing a board game, which you are. It takes up such little space. It has, like I said, zero accounting involved in it, and you can just whip off games 20 minutes at a time, and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's your warband of choice? What's your poison?
Yeah, so last season, in the Shadespire season, I played the Stormcast Eternals, or sorry, I guess Steelhearts champions, and I really loved the play style. I made some conversions with them, gave them a bit of a green kind of salamanders color scheme, and I really loved playing with them. Now in Nightvault, I'm actually still playing a Season 1 army, which is Skaven. I just got them painted up, converted, got them a whole bunch of sewers and all that type of stuff on their bases, and I think they look pretty sharp, and been really enjoying them. I would like to, in this season, maybe get into the Dark Oath warband when they come out, or maybe the Troggoth kind of Van Pals warband that haven't come out yet. Those to me look like a really cool combination of Reavers and maybe Skaven, or just a high model count army for the Dark Oath. And I don't know what to think of the Troggoth that's coming out with essentially just one giant model and a whole bunch of bats and mushrooms sitting around it. I don't know how that army is going to work, but it intrigues me for sure.
Yeah, it does looks interesting. Just one big model and a bunch of small things. But
yeah, like the mechanics.
You could say that same thing about the the Goblin army. It's like maybe two big guys, and then all the rest are kind of small people.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I'm doing right now for Season 2. I went to a tournament this past weekend and brought the Skaven about 3 or 4 days after their banned restricted list came out. So I don't think I really got to use them in their heyday, because the last few months they've been doing really well at some of the tournaments in the UK and in other places. But I'm definitely going to continue to play them because I really love the aesthetic of them and the play style. And we'll probably dive into some other war bands, because that's the beauty of Underworlds, that you can kind of touch everything because you bought the models to get the cards, so might as well. Right? Yeah, you might as well dive into it.
It doesn't seem so weird playing with them unpainted as it does like gray models on a 40K board or something.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit less of a stigma too.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk a bit about that tournament. How many people were there, and who ended up winning, and how did you do?
Yeah, so I that's one thing I really like about the Underworlds tournaments, that there's almost one maybe every other week, and they're a 3 or 4 hour time period. It's not like a full day that you're dedicating. I got wife, kids, and a full-time job. It's really tough to kind of sneak away on multiple weekends, for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours for a big tournament. Yeah. So to play in these smaller ones, there was 8 people there. It was nice. We all chatted. We were all joking around about the ban list. That was in effect. They did enforce the ban and restricted list of this tournament. So everybody did kind of have to do some last-minute tweaks on their decks. But it was a great population of warbands. There was Skaven, myself. There was a Goblin, Dwarf, Magwar's Fiends. There was a Farstrider, a Ghost X, and then there was 2 Eye of the Nine. So there was essentially, of the 8, there was only 1 duplicate. But it was 3 rounds, best 2 out of 3, and I really got my teeth kicked in, which was a lot of fun. I did not adapt very well to the restricted and the ban list. My list going into the weekend, prior to the ban and restricted list, was very similar to John Ree's list, who he just won a big Grand Clash out in the UK, and there's a team tournament out there that he did really well with a very similar list. So my list was very similar, but it had about like 20 of the 25 lit cards on the restricted list, and all 3 of the ban lit cards. Yeah. So I had to make a lot of changes, and I went with, I would call them tier 2 versions of the cards that were in the original list, and it just did not function the same.
Yeah.
There's really no replacement for traps. There's really no replacements for time traps, quick thinker, and great concussion in a list that really kind of wants to go in and punch, but then try to get out or be at least really survivable. So
Yeah.
the Skaven that I brought didn't do very well. I all the games were really close, but I just couldn't seem to eke out a lot of wins. And when I say a lot, I mean any wins overall out of the 2 out of 3. So, but overall, the dwarves actually end up coming out the win with the win. Then goblins, then Farstriders, and then ghosts. So it was, I think, the last few months leading into this. Farstriders have been dominating, and Skaven have been doing well as well. So to see them kind of shift down and to see some of the larger or maybe less known war bands kind of do really well was it was refreshing. I really like the effects already that I've seen in the meta on this new era of deck building.
Awesome. So a question for you, because as somebody who might be running these clashes, now that there's a restricted and banned list, does that mean like we have to get people to submit their decks ahead of time, or like how do you just go on honor code, or somebody have to mentally count that the opponent used more than 5, or what how did you guys enforce that?
It was an honor system. He even came out and said, "Hey guys, like this is all new. We're going on an honor system here. I might do a deck check here and there just to take a quick glance through. But aside from that, we're going with honor, and everybody was clean. Everybody did a very good job of making sure that they had no mistakes. But now that the GW's put out this app, or I guess it's a website for deck building, and it's an incredible you know way of building decks online. Like it's visual. The printout that it gives you is really nice. So I think if people start bringing those to tournaments, it's going to be very clear. It has an R beside restricted, and it highlights, I believe, if you have more than 5. So it's pretty clear. But also the cards that were restricted are so well known that as you're kind of looking through your deck, it's very clear if you're over the 5. You can count them out. They jump out at you. Ready for action. My turn, twist the knife. These are all cards. Change of tactics, advanced strike, defense strike. Like these are all cards that everybody had before. So it's almost weird. They almost jump out at you now that there's so few of them.
Yeah. That's interesting. It would be cool. You mentioned an app. It would be so cool if there was a mobile app. Of course, that would mean even less work gets done during the day because you'd be whittling your deck around constantly.
Yeah, I have tried to use it on my phone. Use the website that they have now for it. I've tried using it on my phone, and it does not work the same at all. If you're on your desktop or your iPad, it's fantastic. If you try to do it on your phone, prepare to be frustrated.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other apps like that do deck building, and I think those are good. But something official would obviously be fantastic.
Yeah. No, it would be good. I bet there's some salty 40k people out there that there's a Nightvault deck builder before a 40k army builder. But there you
go. Yeah, and I think that's again just their dedication to this as a competitive platform, and the fact that before this they had a card library that was very easy to search through, and you can click on each warband and see every single winning. Grand Clash winning deck and a description for it, and the play style on that website. So it's years ahead of where 40k competitive players would like to see GW support for their stuff. And as a 40k player, I really hope they do get there one day. But I feel like they've kind of admitted to themselves that it's just too big of an animal to steer in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, it has its own website, right? It's not part of Warhammer Community. It's its own website.
No. Yeah, it's on its own website, which is, again, just unusual, but fantastic.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, what I was thinking we do is we just dive right into this list. And so what we plan to do was to just go over, just remind people what the cards are, although, as you say, it's probably pretty familiar to people who play Nightvault. And why we think it got banned or restricted, and what alternatives there might be, if any, for people still looking to use the same card. Obviously, picking alternatives is dependent on how your deck functions overall. So we can make comments as to whether or not you need to kind of change completely how your deck is going to function without these cards. But let's dive right in. So we'll start with the juicy stuff, the banned list. And top of that list is one of my previously favorite cards, Great Concussion.
Yeah, and Great Concussion is going to be a tough one to reproduce if you still want that effect. Great Concussion was essentially a way to score Alone in the Darkness at the end, to maybe separate some fighters that were adjacent to each other, a way to get extreme flank by pushing some models to the opposite flanks on the furthest edge boards. And it was also a way to maybe get objective holding war bands to not be on those objectives, right at the end of a phase or an action phase. So the only thing that I'm thinking is probably the best alternative to that is a card called Mischievous Spirits, and that will only help in the rise of objective holding decks. Essentially, what you do is you and your opponent take turns moving each objective 1 hex, and you go around clockwise, each taking a turn back and forth. So if you play the card, you're actually moving 3 of the 5 objectives. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of I think that's maybe your replacement there, and you're gonna have to use pushes for generally moving things around after that. But yeah, Great Concussion. That's gonna be a tough one to replace.
Yeah, what's interesting is after I think Earthquake came out first, and of course Earthquake is restricted now, and then Great Concussion came out after it, and already with Earthquake, objective play decks like the skeletons and the dwarves who needed to stand on objectives at the end of the phase to inspire, those guys were already suffering from Earthquake. You had to run Earthquake in order to counteract Earthquake, basically. And then Great Concussion came out, which is it's better than Earthquake, and then that was it for objective play, basically. Like, those kind of decks, skeletons standing on objectives, just didn't work anymore. So it'll be interesting to see whether objective play comes back now. Although Earthquake's still out there, but is restricted. It'd be interesting to see what happens with that. But yeah. What's interesting,
yeah, I agree.
There was a few new cards in, I think, the Zinch set and the Gobble set, which I don't know if you remember. I can't remember what they're called, but you pick a point or a player or an objective, and it pulls things in. There's 2 or 3 of those cards. One that's based on a model, one that's based on an objective, one is just like a point, I think. And they pull things in towards it, like a reverse Great Concussion. But there's a limit. Yeah. It's like a 2 hex limit, and maybe that's not quite as easily set up as just pushing things away.
Yeah, Center of Attention, I think, is one of those cards that just came out in Nightvault that was in the Goblin deck that kind of it creates that sort of dynamic where you have you pick a model, and then everything within 2 hexes moves 1 hex closer.
Yeah.
So that definitely throws some disorder out there.
Yeah, I was trying to run that in my my Thorns deck because I need to be adjacent to you to inspire. So at the last minute, I'll just suck in all my ghosts next to you, and then boom, they're all inspired.
Yeah, and also there's some, not to take us too far off a tangent here, but there's also quite a few objectives that I think you can score with ghosts or night haunts for being, right. For completely surrounding something. So I think there's some synergy there that a lot of people are probably considering.
Yeah. Okay, well, not much more to say about Great Concussion. It's a really powerful card, and that's why it's banned. So see you later, Great Concussion. So let's move on to the second one. So I'll just read it out for people in case people don't know or don't have the cards in front of them. It's Quick Thinker, and this is a reaction ploy. And you play this after an enemy fighter's move action, and you can make a move action with a friendly fighter who has not already made a move action. And this was super kind of breaking because people, I think the commonest way I saw people use it and how I used to use it was a charge, of course, is a move and an attack action. And so basically, after the move part of that charge, you play this and you move your guy away, and now that guy's just stuck.
Yeah, because he still gets
charge.
Yeah, you still got that charge token, which means you can't activate him again for the rest of the turn. So yeah, it's big. And the only thing that and I looked through every single card, I can't find anything that is a reaction that lets you move away after something like that. The only exception to that is Steelheart has an upgrade that says that if anybody finishes their activation within 2 hexes of him, you can push him a hex, I believe. So he's the only one that's a warband specific card. But the only thing I can think of is Countercharge. Countercharge is probably a very poor man's quick thinker, which at least lets you move one of your models as a reaction to a charge, move them up to 3 hexes to at least be supporting. And maybe if that model dies, now you can punch them back. So that's the only kind of very poor man's quick thinker, because you were essentially trying to avoid the attack before, and now you're just, as it says, countercharging.
Yeah, that's definitely, quick thinker was a very. I remember the first time I used it on somebody, and they're like, "What? Like, what just happened?"
Oh yeah, it was backbreaking.
Yeah. All right, cool. And let's move on to the third banned card, which is Time Trap. So this card, it's a ploy. You choose a fighter. They can take an action, and then you skip your next activation. So basically, it's like a little, to use a Magic reference, a little time walk. So you get to do 2 things, and then you skip your next activation. So this should get banned.
Well, actually, I think, and I've seen some discussions on the web and on some other podcasts about this, about the fact that in the way you read the card, it's actually not that big of an issue. They've since FAQ'd it so that essentially the activation you're making can be an action that normally you wouldn't be allowed to make. For example, if you already have a charge token beside you, you can now make another charge. Like it kind of, way it's written right now, it says you can take an action, but you would think you'd still be adherent to your other actions maybe. But this one, you can make a second charge even if you've already charged. And so they kind of, I feel like they broke the card a little bit kind of through the process.
Yeah.
It's really no different than a ready for action or a my turn or some of the cards that are on the restricted list. But I think they pumped this card up to a point where everybody took it. It was in every single list. And it really broke a lot of the fundamentals of the game. So, there it goes. It's on the ban list, and it probably should be there.
Banned. Yeah. Not really any replacements for that. There's so far no card that lets you kind of take two whole turns.
Not back to back. No. Yet. A lot of warbands to come. Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think? Do you have any cards to add to the banned list if you were in charge of this game?
No. I'm actually pretty happy with what they've done. And this is coming from somebody who's playing 20 of the 25 of these, or the 28 of these, including the bans. I'm really happy. If everybody's playing by the same rules, and this is very different than 40K, where it's not like I bought $200 worth of models and I spent months painting them, and then all of a sudden they're banned, and I just I'm crying to myself every night. These are 3 cards of 400 or 500 and or more, and it's not a big deal. If everybody's not using them, no big deal, not a problem. I can move on and make other decks, which is going to be a lot more exciting, because these were just go-tos. You had to have them.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can't remember the name of the card that basically makes one of your fighters, you can't do anything for the rest of the action phase.
Yeah, so there's a few cards that do that. Most of them are class specific. There is a ploy that's universal. That's a 50-50. Which I think is frozen in time, maybe.
Yeah, frozen in time, that's it.
Yeah, but there is, I think dwarves gotta have like a stare, which is a ploy which automatically goes off, where your model picks another model. That model can't activate that following turn. And I believe there is maybe something very similar on the Magor's Fiends, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm surprised that didn't get restricted at least.
Well, they specifically said in their restriction and ban announcement that their goal here was to remove a lot of the universal cards that were being used so much that people would start using their class cards again, because everything was starting to get a little washed out. Everything was looking a little bland. Yeah, because it was like every single deck was 15 to 20 cards, all the same, and they were all universal. So you started losing a little bit of the flavor that I think they were looking for. And so by getting rid of some of these cards, now maybe dwarves are going to be using that card again, maybe Magor's Fiends. And so now you're going to start maybe being surprised when you play the game as to kind of what you might see.
All right, cool. So yeah, I'm fairly happy with the ban list. I think there's 3 pretty broken cards, and better off without them probably. So I think any card that everybody will automatically use, regardless of what band they play, is probably not good.
Yeah, I think what's that saying? If everything's important, nothing's important. And it's very similar. Where if these three cards are automatic cards that everybody takes, then you might as well not have them, because if everybody has them, then nobody should have them. So it's that kind of concept of need versus want.
Yeah, and same the principle so far in these two seasons is that ploys are where it's at. Not really upgrades. Like ploys is where it's at. If you could take 20 ploys, you could probably just take 20 ploys.
Oh
So no
yeah, yeah.
surprise the three band cards are all ploys.
Hmm.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Magic goes with the rest of this release cycle, and whether any Magic cards end up making themselves on the list. But right now, Magic's just not very strong.
But you know what? They have set up Magic, and again, not to derail us too much, but they have set up Magic in a way that I'm a little concerned. There are currently two universal cards, Arcane Familiar and the Tomb of Incantation, which are both upgrades and both give. I don't know what I call it, lightning. I can never remember what the two symbols are, but the lightning is the one that has three of the six sides, plus the critical makes like a 66% chance of rolling,
Yeah,
and this just automatically gives it to you.
yeah,
So there's two of those cards that automatically give you the lightning symbol.
yeah.
Currently, there's not a lot of magic or cards or effects printed on cards that require lightning. It's all the swirly, and I apologize to anybody who knows what those are. The proper terms are.
Yeah.
But right now they're setting it up so that if gambits, magic ploys start coming out, that are very powerful, doing automatically 2 damage, nothing you have to roll for type of thing, and you automatically get them with these upgrades. I could see that starting to get a little bit broken.
Yeah.
So right now everything's kosher. They're giving you these upgrades, but there's not a lot of spells to use them on. If swirly, as long as there's no innate swirlies coming up, then I think we're okay. But right
There
now
will
these
be,
are
though.
innate. Yeah, well, yeah, that's what makes me
Yeah,
a
there will be.
little
There's
bit.
got to be.
Yeah, that's what I get nervous about, because that's where currently the Curse Breaker, the Stormsire, his ability to essentially at 3 range be shooting 3 or 4 damage is on a single swirl. Whereas if there was a way to get an innate of that, or an automatic crit symbol for that, I think the game would start to kind of fall apart from a balance perspective. So I'm a
Yeah.
little hesitant. I just want to be careful about that, or I'm sure they're being careful. They've been really well thought out about everything I've seen so far.
Well, what my thoughts about Magic is, so far there's not a lot of Magic that is like really powerful, and then so they're kind of like ploys, and then you add the fact that they are dice rolled to get them off. So really, they're kind of like crappier versions of ploys right now. And so when you start adding in all these innate cards and upgrades and stuff that make them easier to cast or auto cast, then they just become like ploys. And so when you have the powerful magics, then those will just be like really powerful ploys. So I don't know. Maybe it might just wash out in the end.
And I think it will. I think they're trying to spoon feeding us a bit here, because they've shown us that they're going to give us these innate lightning. And I apologize again for butchering what they're actually called. But what we really want is swirl, but they're kind of just giving us a little bit at a time. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Dark Oath Warband or the Troggoth Warband coming out, or the Sylvaneth, and like there's a whole bunch coming that have a whole bunch of universals that could really kind of round things out in the end. But right now they're just kind of giving us a taste. They don't want to maybe break things too early.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go back to now. We'll start on the restricted list with the universal objectives, beginning with Advancing Strike. This was a card that I would play. For 1 glory, you score immediately when your warband takes an enemy fighter standing in your territory out of action. Oh, no.
Yeah, and I'd probably
enemy territory out of action.
Enemy territory, and I would probably combine this. I think I saw in the restricted list that there's a lot of kind of groupings of cards that were very similar in how easy they were to score, and I would probably put Advancing Strike, which you described, with probably Defensive Strike, which is the score immediately if you kill someone standing in your territory, and then Precise Use of Force, which is to kill somebody exactly with the amount of damage required. Those three were very easy to score, very aggressive, and I think the three of them are on the restricted list to try to reduce the amount that you could take in a deck, because they were so easy. That is an automatic 3 in most aggressive or even non-aggressive decks.
Yeah, like I was even scoring that with ghosts, and the thing about it is that it's the immediately. Like I had a deck that was almost completely score immediately cards, so you could just cycle through all your objectives so easily, and an instant gain of glory to use for upgrades and stuff. So you're right; those go together. Advancing strike, defensive strike, definitely go together. They're just your side, my side. And then
Mhm.
precise use of force, just such a brilliant. I still have it in my deck. It's one of my restricted cards. It's just so brilliant, especially for low damage war bands like ghosts, where 2 damage, 1 damage is maybe all you need to kill something. It's like so good.
Yeah, yeah. And in terms of kind of keeping with the theme of the band list, for replacements, there are a few cards that are score immediates, but a little bit harder to pull off. There's Strong Start, which is if the first fighter taken out of action is an enemy fighter. And then there's, I think it's Matredom, which is if your model is the first one taken out, you immediately score a glory. So those are kind of very similar to Advancing Strike, Defensive Strike. There is No Remorse, and I think there's two that are for killing something with 1 damage. No Remorse is for killing something with more damage than they have wounds.
Yeah,
Those are very similar to Precise Use of Force, but again, kind of a tier 2 version.
yeah,
And then there's What Armor, which is for just getting an attack off successfully with Cleave, is also a score immediate. So I could see those starting to kind of fill that tier 2 level. Is Instead of taking Advancing Strike, Defensive Strike, Precise Use of Force, kind of going with the No Remorse, What Armor, Strong Start, and Matredom to kind of fill that gap, because if you only get 5, you really need to be smart about your choices.
yeah. I've been looking at martyrdom myself because inevitably one of my Dango Bro ghosts gets ganked like first activation or something. So you get me a glory at least for counteract the early glory loss.
Yeah, yeah, and the nice part is there's a few cards that are ploys that you need to play the turn before your person might get killed, and those are kind of giveaways, and they can be avoided. Where this is a good way for you to get a glory on the board, which might mean that you get to upgrade a weapon onto a ghost, which might mean that you get more glory. It's a way for you to kind of turn the tide. Even if you're losing a model, it's just a guaranteed glory that you then can kind of build momentum with.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, next one on the list is Alone in the Darkness. So this is for 2 glory. You score in an end phase if there are no adjacent fighters on the battlefield. So
Yeah,
I
and
think this used to be comboed with Great Concussion, basically, because that could just spread everybody out and look, nobody's adjacent, and then now you score 2 glory.
yeah, and I think again, just kind of grouping things together, it's a little odd to see Great Concussion get banned and then see cards like Alone in the Darkness, which you just described, and then Extreme Flank, which is also on the list, which is for having 2 models at the furthest opposite edge boards.
Yeah,
For having seeing those on here yet, Great Concussion's gone, so why should they be here? And I think what they're trying to do with Alone in the Darkness, Extreme Flank, Loner, which is another one we'll get to, which is for having no models within 3 hexes, and Perfect Planning, which is to have no fighters move in an action phase. Those are all on the restricted list, and those are all very passive, kind of turtle-ish type cards, and that's a play style I don't think that GW wants to keep encouraging. So they want to put a little bit of a cap on you to say, hey, if you want to play this way, you're not going to get your Twist the Knives, your illusionary filters, your earthquakes, you're not going to get your destiny meets. So they're trying to kind of make it so that you have to make a choice. If that's a play style you want to play, then you're taking a bit of a risk because you're not going to have the ammunition that you might need to back it up. So I think when I look at Alone in the Darkness, Extreme Flank, Loner, and Perfect Planning, I get the feeling that that's what they're trying to hamper. It's not that everybody was running those cards, but it's just a play style that they wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to include those cards in their restricted list.
yeah. I think it's been pretty clear that they don't want people just sitting in their zones doing nothing. They want interaction. They want fighting. They want dice rolling. They want all these things, and so these cards all encouraged the opposite of what they want. You did, and in the last iteration, the last season 1, it was the Stormcast standing at the back that was like the strongest list until the Farstriders came out. So they definitely don't want that happening again.
Yeah, now they
Excuse me.
Ooh, there we go. Now they did still leave some tier two cards that I think can kind of still give a bit of that playstyle, but it's not so far out. Keep them guessing is another two glory because all these ones we're talking about here, or the majority of them are two glory. So two glory for not
For
interacting
doing
is not
nothing.
what they want to do.
Yeah.
But they do have a card called Keep Them Guessing in the new expansion or the new season, which is for doing 4 different types of actions. So moving, if you move, charge, attack, go on guard, or do an action card or do an ability on your card. If you do 4 of those in a turn, you get 2 glory. So they've kept that. They've kept Unbroken Wall, which is if you have at least 3 fighters all beside each other, you get a glory. A Quick on Your Feet, which is just if you make 3 moves, at least 3 moves with all of your models. So again, you don't need to interact to do that. And then Well Guarded, which came out in the leaders pack, which is when you have 2 adjacent fighters to your leader. So they've still kind of left some ways for you to score by being uninteractive, because I don't think they want to force all the armies to be aggro, but I don't think they want to reward it as much as they had been. So there are still some tier 2s, but I just don't think they're going to be as effective as like an overall playstyle.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's go on to the next one, which is Change of Tactics. This is a card I still run.
I still run this too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. 1 glory, score immediately if a friendly fighter that is on guard makes a charge action.
Yeah,
and
and
combos well with some cards that put you on guard.
absolutely. And I think anytime that you can not have to roll dice to score immediately, that's what you want to do. And this is, I think, the only card where you don't actually have to roll dice to score this immediately. Everything else, you need to successfully kill something. You need to, either do a certain amount of damage, get a cleave attack going. This, you just need to be on guard and declare a charge. So it's kind of unusual compared to all the other cards there are. So I think that's why it made the list. I don't think it's necessarily powerful. I don't know if anybody was really abusing it, but it's uninteractive in the sense that it's a guarantee.
Yeah. Interesting question came up in 40k, and yesterday, and the question goes out in Nightvault. So the question in 40k was, can you smite if there's nobody in range? And I don't know. It's like, do you hear a tree if there's nobody there to hear it? And then the question, can you declare a charge? But you have to be able to actually do the attack action, right, to complete the charge.
Yeah, that's right, because a charge is not an actual action, or it's an action, but it is made up of a move and attack. So if you only can do the move portion, but not the attack portion, then I don't think you're able to declare it. So it's if you've got a range 4 weapon, it's not like you need a range 3 in this, and you move 3, then you could be 6 away and still be able to pull off a charge. But if your weapon's only range 1, you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So defense or strike we kind of covered already. Escalation. So 2 glory for in an end phase if you played 3 or more upgrades. What do you think?
Actually, it's even more.
What do you think of that inclusion?
It's even easier than it's actually if 3 or more were played total. Right.
Yeah.
So it is also, again, one of those the easiest 2 glory that you can score, and this is, I think, this is going to end up on everybody's top list or anybody's list. I think everybody's going to still take escalation, regardless of what army they play. It's going to take up one of their slots of 5, because at some point in the game, usually, sometimes even in turn 1, turn 2, there will be 3 combined objectives or upgrades played. Yeah. Either I'm playing 1, you're playing 2. You've got 10 plus each person has 10 plus in their deck, and they have to use them. Otherwise, it's just taking up space. So it's a very safe bet. 2 glory is high. I think if they could reprint this card, they would have reprinted it as 1. They would have, and I think that's why it's on this list, is that it's still too easy of a pick. And if it wasn't on the list, it would be the 6th card in everybody's must-haves.
Yeah, I think either 3 or more if you played 3 or more upgrades for 2 glory, or 1 glory.
Yeah.
Somebody should
for the group
written it that way.
yeah, but it's still a fantastic card. It's one of mine.
Yep. All right, you already mentioned perfect planning. 1 glory, score in an end phase if none of your fighters made a move action, so they want to discourage people just sitting around. And also, like just sniping you from far away or casting spells, as the case may be in the future. Precise use of force we talked about. Extreme flank. Fired up, so 1 glory, score in an end phase if at least 1 surviving friendly fighter is inspired.
Yeah, this one I didn't think should be on the list, and I think
Yeah.
I think they did a great job of this. But there are a few of the 25 that I didn't think deserved to be on there. Fired Up feels like it shouldn't be. It's not all fighters can inspire that easily. So, and it's one glory. It's not like it's two. There is kind of a tier two version, which is called Shining Example, which came out in the leaders deck, which
Yeah.
is if your leader is on the battlefield and inspired. So there is kind of a backup plan to this, but maybe it's just because everyone assumed that at some point in time they'd have one fired up person, one inspired person, and therefore it's going to end up in every deck. So we should restrict it.
Well, the other thing is there are some objectives. I can remember. I think it's one of the skeleton ones where you need to have all your guys. I think they're third end phase cards, and it's all your guys inspired, three or more, at least three or at least five or something. There's variations on that kind of card, and those are pretty low scoring as well. So, so this is a lot easier to achieve for that glory. So maybe that was why they wanted it restricted. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's if we're ranking them, it's the least of the evils here, but it's on the list, and I think I'm still okay with it.
Yeah, I wasn't using it, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We talked about loner score in an end phase if at least one surviving friendly fighter has no other fighters within 3 hexes.
So again, just kind of encouraging that non-interactive play. If you've got somebody who's that far away from everybody, he's that person's that skeleton, that steelheart, that whatever it might be, isn't contributing, and you're kind of gaming the system a bit. So I think that's why it's in there.
All right, let's move on to the good stuff, the ploys. So first one is Earthquake. So just to remind people, Earthquake pushes all fighters 1 hex. Everyone moves in the same direction, and unless you can't physically move. Great card.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think we had mentioned it with Great Concussion earlier, and I think Center of Attention is probably your next best thing to that, which is to choose a fighter and push all fighters within 2 X's, one closer to that. You're using Earthquake as a disruption mechanic to take people off objectives, or maybe you choose yourself. You're trying to get everybody close so that you can cleave or swing around and hit everybody at once. So I think that's a good tier 2 to it, but I'm pretty sure it's on the list just because they want objective holding to be a little bit more threatening than it is right now.
Yeah, I think this is still, especially if we see objective decks start to hit the meta again, I think it becomes a case again where you have to run Earthquake, either to Earthquake or to protect against Earthquake, like it was before Great Concussion came out. So I wonder if we're going to see that it's still going to be one of your 5 restricted.
Yeah, and it's still a tough choice for that exact reason.
Yeah, and now you have lethal hexes too, so now you could be doing damage with your Earthquake. So, yeah. Okay, one of my favorite cards, and people have used this to screw me hard in lots of games, Illusory Fighter. So this is a ploy. Choose one of your fighters on the battlefield, place them on a starting hex in your territory.
Yeah, this was like a get out of jail free card. There was nothing better than, as a Skaven player, running in, clubbing somebody, maybe getting a kill, scoring advancing strike, precise use of force, change attacks, like scoring like 3 glory plus the kill, and then playing this card and then just jumping, 5+ hexes away, and then going in and doing it again the next turn. So I really love this card. Now, I don't think, and I've taken a look, I can't find really any way to move more than 2 hexes as a ploy. The only thing I can find that's kind of maybe a tier 2 to this and is a bit risky is Flickering Step, which is where you roll 8 dice and you choose a friendly fighter and push them up to the number of criticals, which is essentially the version of a 6. So, if you rolled well, you might be able to move, 3-4 ones away, but I've definitely rolled 1 before, and at that point it's the exact same as just a sidestep. But really, I don't think there's any true replacement to Illusory Fighter.
Yeah, in my Thorns deck right now, there's an upgrade that goes on the Queen that lets her, instead of moving, she just goes onto a starting hex. That's pretty good, but it still counts as a move. Whereas this just places your fighter back. It doesn't count as a move. There's another ploy that puts somebody on an unheld objective or something like that. So there are a couple of alternatives, but this was a great as a retreat, as you say, or also as a rat has turned up in my backfield. I need to go back and kill that rat, and that was good for that too.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that card you mentioned was might have been a Eye of the Nines card that I've seen where you can move around to different objectives. It might be an upgrade.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, they're both
Some.
upgrades, so there's some
Yeah,
expenditure required to do that. But
yeah,
yeah, and of course, a card that's not on this list that I thought maybe a kind of alternative that's still a great card is Hidden Paths.
yeah. Hidden Pass. I think they wanted to keep off the list just because it does mess with the turtling army a bit. Like it lets you take a model from an edge hex in your end, and immediately, before your turn starts, you get to move it to an edge hex in the other side. You get a move token, but maybe you move like a full hex away from their leader, and it just gives you that chance to just punch them right in the face. Meanwhile, they thought they were safe for the next few turns to score, unbroken wall, quick on your feet, kind of these ones that are uninteractive. Next thing you know, you're in their backfield with a big orc, and I think they wanted to keep that as a mechanic. The thing is that you can't use it. It's kind of like an opposite to the illusory fighter, whereas the illusory fighter, after you charge in, you can pull it out. Where the hidden paths, you get a move. It says choose a fighter that hasn't moved.
Yeah.
So as a charge move, you're not able to kind of pull them out again after the fact. But I love the card. I'm glad it didn't make the list.
Yeah. All right, next card is My Turn. So this is a reaction. Play this after an attack action or ploy that damages a friendly fighter. Push them up to 1 hex and make an attack action.
Yeah, it's a fantastic card, and I think it kind of, again, grouping some cards together here just to make this review a little bit quicker. I think it's very similar to Ready for Action, which is on the list of ploys. These are two cards that gave you some action economy. It gave you a way to get an extra swing in when you've only got 12 activations in a game, four per turn. You're looking for those extra ways to get an extra swing in, and My Turn and Ready for Action gave those opportunities. But if you're thinking to yourself, what do I have to do to get a similar result without, not being able to take Advancing Strike or some of the other 5? Second Wind is a way to kind of get around some of the mechanics in a game to allow you to choose a model that's already charged, and on the next turn they can act as if they moved rather than charged. So that's where you can get an extra attack in. And there's a new card that came out called Aggressive Defense, which is a reaction that if you see something small coming at you, it's similar to My Turn. You can decide not to roll any defense dice. So you take the chance that they miss, or if they do you a little bit of damage, and then you can immediately attack them back. So Aggressive Defense is kind of similar to My Turn, and is not on the list, and I think can give kind of a similar feel.
And there are a bunch of faction-specific ones that let you.
Oh yes.
Let you do this similar sort of thing. Some of them are when you miss, so you get to kind of try again. Those are great cards, especially if you play crappy fighting warbands like I do. But there's a lot of faction-specific ones too.
Yeah, and this conversation we're having right now about these restricted universal cards, I think, is the goal of this from GW standpoint is to try to get everybody to look back at their faction cards and maybe realize that there were some cards that were fairly similar. Maybe it's not the exact same, but it's just a small step back. So they can save one of their 5 by taking something that's faction that's got a little bit of flavor to it. So I definitely think that's the goal.
Yeah. All right, so we mentioned it already, Ready for Action. I believe it's still in my deck because it's so good. But basically, it's a reaction. After you upgrade the fighter, you can then make a move or attack action. And because it says move or attack action, you can do it even if that person has done their stuff before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so good. Next one is Trap, a card that I think is still in my deck. But basically, it's a reaction. After play this during a friendly fighter's attack action that drives an enemy fighter back, the enemy takes the damage.
Yeah, and I think this is, again, grouping things together. There's only 3 reactionary universal cards that deal an extra damage. There's Twist the Knife, Trap, and Pit Trap. Yeah. That's right. There's those 3.
Cards we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So might as well chat with them now. Those essentially were reactionary. They were givens. You didn't have to roll any dice. Essentially, as soon as you did that first damage, you could play one of these to do that extra bit of damage that would usually kill something. So I am happy to see these on the restricted list as an aggro type player with the Skaven. I do feel like the lack of +1 kind of ploys makes some warbands feel a little soft now.
Yeah.
And it is tough to give up the easy score immediate cards to compensate. So like you're kind of put in a situation where, well, I can keep my twist the knife traps and pit traps, but I'm going to lose my advancing strike, defensive strike, and precise use. Kind of because I was kind of using those together. I was using my twist the knife to get that first kill.
Yeah.
So you're kind of getting put into a situation about what do you want more, and I think that's healthy. But anyway, so getting back to some alternatives to those three, because they are pretty critical. You can get faction specific stuff or class specific stuff, but there are cards like Encroaching Shadow, which is to choose an enemy fighter in an edge hex. They immediately suffer 1 damage. And now that takes a little bit of setting up to do, but I think that's what GW is looking for. Is they don't want you to have these easy reactions. They want you to maybe go after somebody who's in an edge hex, or knock somebody into an edge hex and then use this. So that's one way to get that extra damage in. There's also a new card called Spike Surface, which is a reaction, and you get to play that is if somebody's beside either an edge hex or a blocked hex. So there's a heck of a lot of boards that have blocked hexes. So if somebody's coming into your zone or they have them, this is something you can play if you damage somebody beside a blocked hex. So again, you're having to think a little bit more, work a little bit harder for it. But that's why it's a tier 2 card. You're making the choice to give up one of your 5 to play that instead. But I think a lot of armies have that sort of mobility. And then the last one is Lethal Ward, which is to choose an objective token. Any fighter in the same hex as that token suffers 1 damage. So that's another one where you can either the person's already standing there, or you can knock them into it when you knock them back. So there's some ways to get that +1 damage in the universal pool, but most times I probably would recommend just going to your class specific cards, because there's a lot of ways there just to get that extra little bit of damage.
Yeah, I know
those are my thoughts, at least.
There's a couple of ghost cards that do damage for moving through people, and it makes you I remember that one time I hit somebody, only supposed to do 2 damage, but then I did a trap and I pushed them back into a lethal hex, and so it did 4 damage and killed somebody. But pushing people back into a lethal hex is a valid strategy for getting that extra damage. Just have to think a little bit more outside the box now. But you can still run like one of these. This can be very useful that one time you really need it.
Yeah, that one trap, is probably worth it, or maybe the twist the knife. I think trap's better than twist the knife in a lot of situations, just because twist the knife has a 1 damage, has a range 1 requirement. Yeah. But also I think there's some kamikaze type armies out there where there's a lot of ploys that say, if you kill me, take a damage. And I think that type of that damage over time type play style might start to become more relevant when you've got cards like Shard Gale, which deals 1 damage to everything, and then when they come in to start poking at you, every single time you die, you immediately deal them 1 damage. That's a good way for some of these more elite armies to really take them out if you don't have the twist the knives and the traps and the pit traps.
Yeah. Okay, so that's all the restricted ploys. Any ploys that you think should have made it on this list?
No, I was actually pretty happy with it. I think there's some cards that I think will start to be used in every deck after this, but I don't think they deserve to be on this list, because I think they are inferior to the cards that they put on there. There's no point in putting the tier 1 and the tier 2 version of a card on the list.
Cool. Okay, we'll move on to upgrades. We'll start with, as we said, we'll group 2 cards that are extremely similar, and that is a Destiny to Meet and Slumbering Key. So basically, Destiny to Meet is if it's an upgrade. If this fighter's not out of action at the end of the game, you get an additional glory, and Slumber Key is basically the same thing. So they got rid of those 2.
Yeah, and I think it's under the same. You can start to see a bit of a trend with the turtling decks, where they don't want to reward you as much for being alive at the end. If that is the goal of your deck building, then maybe you're not looking to be interactive, and they don't want to reward you, or at least they want you to make a conscious decision that you're picking one of your 5 cards in order to fulfill that deck play or that play style. So I'm not surprised to see these on here. They did leave some kind of universal objectives that do similar things that you have to work a little bit harder for.
Yeah.
Hero's Mantle came out in the leader set, and it can only be put on your leader. And it says if this fighter's on the battlefield at the end of the third phase, gain a glory.
Yeah.
So kind of similar to those two, but restricted to your leader.
Yeah.
There's the formless key. The formless key is if you're holding an objective,
Yeah.
and it can be any objective, you score 1 glory. And then for the armies that I think are using a lot of single glory objectives, there's the shifting map that says if this fighter's not out of action in the third phase, draw an objective card, so one of your remaining objective cards. And if it's worth 1 glory, you score 1 glory. So, if you're only carrying Denial as your 3 cost, or you're only carrying, the Tactician one, then you have a good feeling that when you put shifting map on, that you're going to be able to get that extra glory at the end. And this is on top of the other keys that are objective based, about standing on specific objectives. But these ones are kind of your freebies where you're not stuck to having to try to get to that objective to make it work.
Yeah. So what do you think about the other keys then? Because they give you 2 glory, but you have to obviously be standing on a particular objective, and it's easy to move people off these days. That's probably why they didn't make because that 2 glory at the end of the game can be a big deal.
Yeah, even sometimes the 1 glory. Like I definitely one of the games at last weekend's tournament I lost was because somebody had a Destiny to meet on their model, along with the Hero's Mantle. They had those 2 on there, and I lost 7-8, and I just couldn't get to the back of the board in time to kill that model. So I think there's a lot of the games I think are going to get closer now that some of these easier to score ploys are gone. I think the scoring is going to become a little bit more in line because there were some blowouts before. So I think having these 2 easy ones out of the way, or at least that you have to make a decision for, is going to be healthier.
Yeah. All right. A card I took out of my deck because it was really good, but I decided to take it out, was next is Awakened Weapon. So reroll 1 attack dice each time this fighter makes an attack action.
Yeah, I think it's such a good card because getting greater efficiency, we're talking about like before, but in 40K you roll 100 dice.
Yeah.
In this game you roll 1, 2, 3. Like it's odd if you have to roll more than that. So trying to get every single extra pip, or every extra, or I guess in this game there's not pips, but every extra 16% chance you can give yourself, or a reroll, has huge value. Yeah. So cards like Helpful Whispers, which is another card that's going to be right beside this one. Helpful Spirits, which is if this fighter has no adjacent friendly fighters, rolls of a single support are a success. So essentially you're adding that extra 16% chance. Yeah. Helpful Whispers and Awakened Weapon just give extra efficiency that I haven't been able to find in other upgrades. I can find ploys that kind of give you an extra dice or give you extra things. But in terms of a permanent upgrade that increases your efficiency, I couldn't find any other cards that were universal. So yeah, I do think... Yeah, there's definitely ploys and there's definitely warband specific stuff, but I think they took these and put them on the list because everybody wants greater efficiency. So they were starting to show up in a lot of decks.
Yeah, like, it's often frustrating. You can fluff like your attacks so many times in a row because you're only rolling 1 dice or 2 dice, and yeah, so it's like, and they're all equatable to 3 up or 4 up or 5 up in 40K, but nowadays you're rolling 30 dice, 40 dice. You lose that sense of frustration sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's I don't want to down on that too much in this game because I think that's what turns a lot of people off from 40K, and I'm going to say AOS as well. I don't want to be picking a 40K, but or picking in general. I love the game, but I think that's what pulls people away from 40K is the fact that it's so deadly. If you don't have first turn, you can lose your entire army, because they're going to roll 100 dice, where it's kind of nice in Underworlds where it's you go, I go, you roll 2 dice. Yes, you can take me out, but there's a chance you don't. Whereas I think in 40K and AOS, there's certain laws of statistics that say, if I'm going to go first, you're going to lose half your army. And if I roll really well, you might lose the whole thing. So I think that's from a player enjoyment standpoint, it is kind of nice that the game feels like you're in it longer. But Awakened Weapon and Helpful Whispers, which I don't think tipped it over the line by adding that extra 16% chance to some of those dice. I think it's just because they were starting to be seen in every deck, and it's just that kind of that washing or generalization across all the decks and warbands, that they just wanted to take these out so that people had to make other decisions or prioritize these in their top 5, which I don't think this should end up in anybody's top 5. I don't think these are. I would be taking objectives and ploys over these every day.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, next is Incredible Strength. +1 damage to all attack actions with a range of 1 or 2.
Yeah, do you think that they accidentally, they put out Incredible Strength when well, they had Great Strength, and then they printed Incredible Strength, and me and the guys, we always thought it was a little funny that they wouldn't even rename it something else more creative, like Great Strength and then Incredible Strength, but it's still just +1.
Yeah.
So I just, in my mind, I'm thinking they printed it and then didn't realize that people would be stacking it. I'm not too sure, because people who ran 1 Incredible Strength would run 2, and then people who didn't care about it wouldn't run any. So I don't know if, I'm surprised it's on the list, but I'm also surprised they even printed it in the first place, because it's just A, not creative, and B, I just think it kind of polarizes too much to some decks and not others.
Why wouldn't they just restrict Great Strength instead?
Yeah, that's what somebody else made that joke too. They said, I'd rather have Incredible Strength, or why not just say one or the other?
More incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the only kind of weird thing that I thought. It was like, well, why this one and not the other one? But anyway.
Yeah, but looking at alternatives to that, like we're talking tier 2 cards again, like trying to help people find those. Yeah, I guess is Great Strength. But if you're looking to get something else in there, I think you're going more to a Concealed Weapon. Concealed Weapon is an upgrade that when you get a critical hit, anything that has a range of 1 gets +2 damage. So I think if you're rolling a lot of dice, like 2 or 3 dice, 3 swords, for example, and you're going to be wanting to put Concealed Weapon if you weren't already running it, that is maybe a good item to pair with Great Strength versus putting a second Incredible Strength in.
Yeah, and I was running, like, my Briar Queen, her attack is 3 swords. I was putting on a strength increase, Incredible or Great, I can't remember. And then I would have Awaken to reroll one of those 3 dice. And then I would have the, what was it, the Concealed one?
Yeah, Concealed Weapon, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm doing, like, +2 damage on a crit, so I was doing, like, 5-6 damage, like, it's crazy.
Yeah, and maybe they wanted to kind of tone that down a bit, but at the same time, I just why keep the Great and get rid of the Incredible?
Yeah.
And that's the nice part of what they've done here is they've said they're not taking all these off the table. They're not slapping the cards into your hands. They're saying if that's the playstyle you want, you can still do it. There isn't a deck I think that you can't still make out of these 5 cards that you get to pick, or the tier 2 equivalents of the ones you don't end up going with.
Yeah. Okay, so the next 2 cards are Shade Glass weapons, the Dagger and the Hammer. They are both weapons that do an extra damage on a crit. They do 3 damage base. The Dagger is 3 swords and the Hammer is 2 hammers, naturally. So those 2 made the restricted list, but not any of the other Shade Glass weapons.
Yeah, and I think these, again, are two weapons they wish they hadn't printed this way. The damage that these things can put out, when you're rolling 3 swords at 3 damage and a crit puts it up at 4 damage, because that crit, as soon as you get that crit, you're essentially forcing your opponent to they have to roll a crit, which is extremely hard. So you're these 2 weapons, you're essentially able to one-shot everything short of maybe 1 or 2 models without upgrades. You're able to one-shot. So I think these 2 cards, they didn't ban them, which I think is good. But you need to make a decision again about whether you'd like to keep these in your 5. And for me, I didn't. At the tournament last weekend, which I guess shouldn't be any example because I didn't do well. But these 2 weapons weren't the reason. But I think the Shade Glass Axe and the Shade Glass Spear are probably good tier 2 equivalents. They both have ranged abilities. So the Shade Glass Spear is range 2 hammer, and 2 damage. And again, on a crit, it does +1. So you're still rolling a lot of dice. You're still potentially getting 3 damage, and at this point, you're maybe 1 hex away. So you're out of a threat range. And the Shade Glass Axe, you can throw it 3 hexes for 2 hammers and 2 damage on a crit. It's an extra damage. So I think if you're looking for those high damage, high dice roll, which is hard to find, weapon upgrades, these are still 2 of the better ones.
Yeah. There's lots of Shade Glass weapon options these days. I still like my Hero Slayer. Occasionally, it'll do fantastical things.
Well, and And I think that weapon you just mentioned there with the Hero Slayer, there's now a card which I think is called Potion of Rage, maybe. I might have said that wrong, but it's an upgrade you can put on where you kind of sacrifice it or you reaction it to get rid of it, and you get an extra 2 dice. And I think, geez, wow, combining that with some of the weapons that are like 1 dice, like 1 hammer, and do 4 damage. Now all of a sudden you're rolling 3 hammers that does 4 damage. Like that's all of a sudden now you got a bit of a combo there. So I like that weapon.
All right, and the next two are basically the same: Soul Trap and Tethered Spirit. So these are the ones basically you upgrade your guy if they die on a 50% chance of not dying.
Yeah, and again, outside of the universal cards, I don't think they have any printed, or sorry, within the universal classes or cards, there is no alternatives to these. The only thing that is there's ploys. So there's a ploy called Last Chance, which is a reaction, and what it says is that you roll a single dice, and if it would not normally be a success, you live. So it's really good on single dodge. Or on dodge, because now you're passing 66% of the time you're a Space Marine, essentially. But the good news is that it's a 50-50 as well on shield saves. So you're still getting that that kind of oops type moment, but you're doing it in a ploy. The ploy is a really valuable card slot. So I'm not too sure how many people are going to take it, but for people who do, it's there. Rebound is in that same category.
Rebound.
You're kind of stepping down the efficiency. It's a 33% chance of passing, but I believe rebound is any damage, so it doesn't need to kill you, and you do reflect it back to the bearer. So this is I usually would see this in armies that have like low, like it's skeletons or Skaven, where somebody comes in, a Stormcast comes in hitting for 3 or 4. And just to kill your little two wound guy, and you rebound that damage right back into their face, and you kill them. And nice. So I do like the card. 33% chance. It's a ploy, so it's fighting against a lot of other good options. But I think that's also an oh no or get out of jail free card, just like the Tethered Spirit and Soul Trap. And then the only other one I could find was On Your Feet, which is same thing. You need to have an adjacent friendly model, but it's a 50-50. Hammers or crits to get out of that damage. But again, those are 3 ploys, which that's what Tethered Spirit and Soul Trap were so good at, was you didn't need to take the ploys to potentially save yourself.
Yeah, I like. I think these two, because they were upgrades as well. I don't know if you felt this whenever you saw it being played by your opponent, but it would change what you did. It didn't feel worthwhile to attack those guys anymore.
Yeah, given the choice, absolutely. Like if I've got two semi-equal opportunities, I'm not going to go. I've already got like a 50 or a 33% chance of getting the damage through anyway. Yeah. And now when you're taking a 50% chance away from me, like I don't want to overstat this, but it really reduces my opportunity to kill that model when they've got something like that on them.
Yeah. Yeah, so like again, if you're talking like the 3 dudes sitting at the back, and one of them's got Soul Trap and the other's Tethered Spirit, like you're literally not doing anything to them.
Yeah, and then on top of that, they've got Destiny and Meat, Slumbering Key. Like there was a time where some of these warband playstyles were not very fun. So I think they've corrected that a lot here.
Yeah. Okay, and that is the list. So overall, you like the list?
Yeah. Overall, I'm extremely pleased with it. I think. I was shocked when it came out. Not shocked in the sense that it wasn't deserving, but there was no rumor of it. It just on a Wednesday, you wake up one day and they've got a list of 25 cards that are restricted and 3 banned cards. And for me, I had a tournament a few days later. But I think everybody's just really excited to start thinking outside the box a little bit. I think because everyone owns all the armies, everybody's pretty happy. This isn't like, again, 40K OS, where there's a lot of bias. There is, I am a Blood Angels player, and if it's not good for Blood Angels, then I'm generally not happy. This is a game where if you have all the cards, you've got all the warbands. So when something gets shooken up, you don't care too much. You know what I did when they announced this? I went over to my card binder and started pulling out different cards. I didn't have to repaint models. I didn't have to go to the store to buy anything. It was kind of an exciting moment where I had to go back and there was a new kind of challenge to be met. So
Yeah.
I think looking at the community, everybody's taking a very similar approach, which is really nice. And I think this was a great play by GW.
Yeah, shows they care. They really want to make this a tight, competitive game, and they're willing to admit some mistakes and ban things and restrict things. And they would never say that we're going to ban Yanari now, even though they should. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Possibly the biggest mistake in the last 2 years for 40K. So I think it bodes well for Nightvault, and I'm also excited to see what comes out. What do you think is going to come out from this big shakeup? What's going to flip to the top?
Yeah, I think I'm not entirely too sure, as I don't think anybody can say they are too sure. But I could definitely see that the lack of opportunity to score a lot of immediate cards, because what they've done here is they've taken out a lot of the easy score immediates. It's going to make it tougher for aggressive decks to build that early momentum. And in those type of decks, upgrades are going to start to feel really heavy. You're going to have 2 or 3 upgrades in your hand, and there's going to be, if you don't have passive scoring cards, being ones like Keep Them Guessing or Shining Example, if you don't have those passive ones, there's a good chance that after the first turn, you might not have any glory.
Yeah.
And you've now got all these upgrades that, geez, you really love to get out of your hand. So I can see a lot of the more aggressive decks having to kind of tone down that all or nothing play style, which they have to, because without Quick Thinker and some of these I keep on thinking it's Illusionary Fighter, without some of these cards that they had before to get them out of trouble, they couldn't be aggressive anyway, or as aggressive.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to see is the aggressive decks be toned down a little bit, and then I think we're going to see some of the objective holding decks kind of rise up a little bit more. At the tournament last weekend, it was definitely the Goblins, which have a bit of punch and have ways to scurry onto multiple objectives at the same time, and Ghosts. It was really neat to see these decks kind of thriving in this post ban restricted meta. So I really like where things are going, and I think they're only going to get better with the Dark Oath and the Troggoth. I think the Sylvaneth Warband and the Caradron Overlords are the remaining warbands this season, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen. I'm interested to see what's going to happen when they want to add more cards to this list, as they should. Maybe, in the future, maybe they're going to add more, but are they going to increase the number you can take? That's the part I'm interested to see is at the end of this season, or maybe later in the season, maybe there's a spring and a fall FAQ or ban restricted list. Are they going to increase the number to 35, but then you can now take 7 of the cards? Like that I'm not too sure how that dynamic is going to work. It looks really good right now, but long term, I guess I'm just not too sure. Yeah, like I have to assume they have a plan. Like I can't be the only one wondering, what happens on this road that you've started paving, a kilometer down the road, or a mile, I guess, if you're down in the States. So that I'm interested to see future wise what they're going to do there. But overall, very excited with the meta. I just signed up for Adepticon. So my road to Adepticon has just kind of started. I've got a whole bunch of tournaments, kind of local tournaments over the next few months, which I'm really excited about. We've got a great community, at least here in our area. Like a lot of lunchtime games, evening games. Like they're just so quick, and everybody's kind of trying different decks, different war bands. The hobby is strong.
Yeah, I think for myself, pre-list, I was playing Thorns, trying to play an aggro type Thorns list, trying to get all my ghosts next to you and surrounding you, get them all inspired. They're actually pretty hard to kill once they're inspired with the 2 dodge. And then lots of damage upgrades and strengths and weapons and things like that. Totally aggro ghost deck. And now, since I lost a lot of those score immediate cards, now I've gone complete back to kind of my quote-unquote roots when I used to play skeletons, which is objectives and supremacy and tactical 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and some keys thrown in there. What's that card where you can switch objectives?
I definitely know the one you're talking about.
Yeah. So and then ghosts have a couple of built-in fashion sort of things like the Queen's upgrade, and so playing really what maybe ghosts were supposed to be played like, although you still got to get your ghosts next to people to make them survivable. So it's an interesting mix trying to figure it out post this list, how to play ghosts the best. But I think probably swings more towards objective holding than full on aggro.
Yeah, and I can say that this past weekend, in one of the games, our first game, somebody at the end of turn one scored like supremacy, escalation. Like they just went up like 7 points, or 7 glory, at the end of turn one. Meanwhile, I had scored like 2, and I couldn't believe it because I tried to push them off the objectives, and I just couldn't. They had so many ways. Their deck was built with so many pushes and so many. Because if you with goblins, you can give a move to one, even in the ploy phase. Power phase, you can move one, and the rest of them get to scurry too. So like, there's so many ways now to get back on objectives, if you need to. That I think those decks have the teeth, and it's a different type of teeth than the aggro decks, but they have ways to win, and that's important.
Yeah, I was playing yesterday against Chris, Fire Slayers, and basically I pushed him off all the objectives and pushed myself on all the objectives, and I scored like 8 points in the first turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And as the meta adjusts, and we do want it to adjust, we want it to ebb and flow. People will start taking those cards, like we were talking about, mischievous spirits, which is when, in the polite phase, and maybe it's right before the end of the turn, you take all the objectives and you take turns moving them off one, and that could be the thorn in their side. And I think that's nice that there's tools and there's no sideboard to this, but I think it's nice to have cards that can thwart other people's plans.
Do you think we're going to see sideboards?
I don't know. Like, I was surprised to see a ban in a restricted list. So I think they're being really creative. They really seem to care about the health of the game. And I think if they see things starting to become too rock, paper, scissor, well, like, I'm playing objectives, I'm playing aggro, I automatically win. If they start seeing that type of dynamic created, then they are going to, I think, go with some sideboard cards, and maybe it's only sideboarding objectives. Maybe it's only sideboarding ploys. I'm not too sure. They're creative people. They'll come up with something. But I think that would then give the chance for, if you can't beat skeletons because you just can't, they're just scoring supremacy and all the claim the city and all these ones. If they're scoring those every turn and, you can't do anything about it, I could see them coming in.
Yep. Cool. Okay. Any, what's next up for you for Nightvault? You mentioned a bunch of tournaments, just local stuff, or Adepticon's your big goal?
Yeah, lots of stuff. Well, I don't know. I'd be happy with top 16. There's, I took a look, and there's already 100 or so people signed up.
Wow.
For the Grand Clash. So that's huge. I'm pretty excited about that. But no, I got a tournament in 3 tournaments in the GTA, Greater Toronto area, over the next month or so, and there's even one that's on a Tuesday night, which I think is great for people who can't always make weekends or work weekends, to kind of have just a 3-hour tournament for 3 rounds. That's a tournament I could never do with 40K. So I'm really excited that there's opportunities fitting my schedule now.
Awesome. Well, I'll be seeing you at Adepticon. I'm not playing Nightvault, but I'll be there this year, which is super exciting. And
very excited.
Hopefully, if you're up this part of Ontario soon, we'll hit some Nightvaults for sure.
Absolutely. Well, you let me know when you guys are running a tournament up there. I'll drop on by.
Yeah, we're thinking of running a league that's going to end in the tournament. So just trying to kind of hammer down the venue and what night that people kind of want to play. So it's definitely building popularity. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, keep me in the loop. Thanks again for inviting me.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Geoff, for joining us. And thanks, everybody, for watching this episode of CanHammer TV. And we'll see you guys next time. So keep an eye out on the Twitch channel and our Facebook page for announcements. But the next live stream will be this Friday night, where I will be live streaming Orcs for the first time on the channel. Jay's playing his Orcs against my Drukhari. So that should be an exciting game of 2 people playing 2 armies for the first time. So thanks very much for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time.